on Junkies. It's like, you know, no buses arrive for ages, and then suddenly three land pretty much all at once. And we are here to review The Trial of the Chicago 7. It's a sort of historical legal drama.
Yes.
Directed by Aaron Sorkin.
And written by him.
And written by Aaron Sorkin. Only his second film is directed. I think his first one was Molly's Game or something.
Which was good.
Was it?
I'm one of the few people in the world that saw it. It was in the cinema for about a week.
Oh.
And it's Jessica Chastain, who I always think is good.
I'm not a fan of Jessica Chastain.
Oh, you cannot not be a fan of Jessica Chastain.
Well, I cannot be. I am not a fan of Jessica Chastain.
All I can say is I've got
The West Wing. I never got into The West Wing, though I've always heard great things about it. But it does strike me that when I've seen clips from it, it sits within a very sort of specific time capsule of, I don't know when it was made. Was it the 80s, 90s, what noughties? Whenever it was, it seems very sort of streamlined and polished, but not edgy. So when I hear the name Aaron Sorkin, I know he's a cracking writer. I know he's in the right place politically. I know that he's got to be incredibly talented, but he doesn't fire me up with excitement. No,
well, that's probably because it is so long ago now that was, and if you weren't a fan of it, if you weren't watching it, then it was revolutionary, The West Wing.
He wrote The Social Network as well, didn't he?
He did.
I mean, it's not to say that I don't think there's obviously The West Wing is considered one of the greatest political dramas ever.
He developed a new way of sort of writing, I think, and that people said that, I mean, this thing of not finishing sentences and coming in and almost an improvisational feel, but where everybody melds very well. He developed the thing called the walk and talk shot, where everybody's walking and talking, obviously. And
sort of a precursor to all of that, the thick of it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, yes, but in a bigger way, because it was an American.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, it's a legal drama, and it focuses on 7 anti-Vietnam activists. You could argue, does it include the black character? Was he one of the anti-Vietnam demonstrators?
But the film makes that clear.
No, absolutely. So,
will you sit down?
No, but it's funny because it's the trial of the Chicago 7, and yet there's always an 8th played rather brilliantly by Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who you will know from Black Mirror. So this is the trial of the Chicago 7 +1. Tell us why you were drawn to this. I wasn't drawn to wanting to watch this on Netflix at all.
No, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've become its sort of like main. I've watched it twice now, all the way through, and it's a complicated story. But because it's sort of my generation, and I knew bits of it anyway, in actual fact, like certainly about the Black Panthers, certainly about the fact that he wasn't allowed to represent himself and the whole thing of... and then I just thought, I fell under the spell, I have to say, of Aaron Sorkin, in the sense that I just thought it was brilliantly written. I've always liked courtroom dramas, some people don't. I thought every single person in it.
Well, he did A Few Good Men, didn't he? He wrote A Few Good Men, I think,
all
as well,
those years
which
ago,
is that famous one with Jack Nicholson,
probably
isn't it?
Worth seeing again.
Yeah. Okay. So this is set in 1968. It's a period drama. It's a period legal drama. It's about a group of activists who were demonstrating at the 1968 Democratic National Convention. And in the process of demonstrating, riots ensued. It transpires across the course of the film that those riots were more than likely and almost inevitably caused by the police, but the government was desperate to frame these 7 activists, and they were going to face some pretty lengthy time, weren't they? And so really it is a trial of those 7, and I think
it was a trial. What they were trying to do was make it a trial of conspiracy, because conspiracy carries the biggest sentence.
But would you say that it was significant at the time? 1968 is very famous politically everywhere, isn't it? May 1968, the riots in France, all that kind of stuff. Do you think this was very much a moment where the establishmentarianism wanted to kind of give hippie culture a smack in the face?
Absolutely.
And this almost, I think this film is trying to suggest that this was a pivotal moment.
Oh, it absolutely
in that.
Was. It was.
And so we have some remarkable actors in it.
We do.
As I just said, you've got Yahya Abdul-Mateen, you've got Sacha Baron Cohen, you've got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who plays the lawyer, Michael
really
Keaton,
rate him, Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Frank Langella, Eddie Redmayne, Mark Rylance, Jeremy Strong from Succession. So you've got a very strong cast. And I always think when I see a cast that strong of Maddie's comment, that whenever you have that many great sort of names in something, that it never amounts to the sum of its parts.
I would agree with that in some respects, but not in this, where they were so clearly delineated. Each group I mean, what the government did was it put them together in groups.
They all had very nuanced opposition to the Vietnam War.
Yeah, yeah.
And what they sought to do was group them all together very clumsily, very shoddily, and very politically. And I think what this film becomes is it's a legal drama about whether this is a political conviction, whether they're trying to try them for their politics, or whether they're trying to try them for their crime. And so you've got all these remarkable actors. Now, I'm a fan of all of them. I'm a fan of Mark Rylance. Eddie Redmayne, the jury's out for me. I feel that he's always Eddie Redmayne for me in everything that he's in.
Up until this film for me, but I thought he was brilliant.
Sacha Baron Cohen, I struggle with him in serious parts. So I wonder whether what captured you with this was the fact that it was of your era, all your people, and of your time. Yeah. Was that it? Because I have to say, I watched this in 2 sittings. I'm going to be honest. I watched it on Netflix. I found the first half really difficult. Not necessarily saying it was bad, but I found it really difficult. I found all of the characters, all of the actors playing the characters, you know, these real historical characters, it felt very cartoony. I recognise that was a kind of stylistic motif he was going for, kind of pastiche and sort of satire, but it wasn't, I didn't find it funny.
Okay.
I didn't find it witty, and I didn't find it clever, and I feel like things have moved on considerably since The West Wing, where you've got to be a bit snappier, both in the way it's shot. It was quite leaden, it was quite static. I was troubled by how I felt most of the actors were impersonating people rather than acting them. So I found even Jeremy Strong, who I'm a big fan of in Succession, I found his accent frustrating. I found Mark Rylance's wig frustrating and his mannerisms frustrating.
Yeah, okay, go on. Carry on with your description, and we'll come back to the manneredness, because the manneredness is part of it.
And then, and I found Frank Langella, who plays the judge, I found him mannered. And I found,
you really didn't like it.
And I found the whole Black Panther story. Whilst I'm not saying obviously this was part of the story,
yeah,
I was left with a really curious feeling halfway through, and certainly towards the end, which was it was like the whole Black Lives Matter Black Panther thing was slightly marginal. You always talk about the rhythm of a film and the balance of a film, and this felt like an incredibly imbalanced film. I was struggling to know where we were being asked to place our loyalties, place our focus, because I thought actually John Gordon-Levitt, is that his name? I thought he was very good.
Oh, I think he's good in everything.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was almost, he was a bit of a standout for me, and he very much carried the beginning of it. He was the lawyer that the government was brought in to prosecute these guys. Yeah. And I was drawn to him. There was something about him that I found really kind of sort of fascinating.
I think he's a really underrated actor.
Yeah, and he was the only one who I didn't feel was impersonating someone.
Actually, that's interesting you saying that, because as you're saying that, and I take myself back to watching it, and I watched it, I do think it was a mistake to watch it in 2 halves, because it builds, and I mean, okay. And it's a very complicated premise and setup to get all these faces into our minds and who they are and how their relationship together. Because what we discover as the film goes on is that they do have a relationship, although they shouldn't have been tried all together.
Yes.
I do know what you mean about the Black Panther thing, except that what they had to do was show, because that is true, that judge brought a black person into a court with a
quite astonishing,
with a gag and in chains, and in that respect, after refusing to let him talk or represent himself or be represented, and everybody was bending over, even the ones that he actually got in the dock, the 7 or 5 or however many there ended up being, which were bending over backwards to do what he said in the end, and he was just not having it. He was mad. The people who said he was a mad judge, but I have to say, if in the end you didn't find that whole sort of, the way the courtroom scene completely went, I mean, you didn't like it. You clearly didn't like it at all.
Well, no. I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, I you know, clearly a very important moment, and I'm a big fan of refocusing on moments from recent history that have perhaps been overlooked or not focused on enough. So, for example, I'm thinking of things like Detroit. You know, I'm really up for all of those re-examination. My problem with this was it important as it possibly was to talk about, I couldn't see why there was an urgency to make it. Why were we being asked to care?
Well, I would absolutely agree with that, right up until I sat and started to watch the film, and then I was totally in the game. I was in the game then. I knew the names, I knew what was at stake, if you like. I thought the fact, I really like his sort of almost semi-cartoonish I thought the Gordon-Levitt character was deliberately made real. I thought Mark Rylance was real too, so he had two real people arguing with a collection of cartoons or impersonators, as you say. But in a sense that worked, because what they were doing, I mean, the hippies, they were all from different parts of the left. They all sort of joined up. Eddie Redmayne, I mean, I'm going to give you a fascinating fact now, people watching this, which was not in the film and is nowhere that I just happen to know this. That Eddie Redmayne character, I forget what the character's name that he plays in the thing.
Tom Hayden.
Is Jane Fonda's husband.
Oh,
Jane Fonda
right.
married him back in the day, and they stayed married forever. And it's just interesting. It speaks to me so much because it's my history.
I thought Eddie Redmayne's accent was very good. I found myself, unfortunately, focusing on how well I thought the actors were acting, and that for me is the big problem with the film. I was focusing on each of them and how well they were doing in their part, which for me means the story hasn't grabbed me. It didn't feel to me that they'd set this up as a kind of like, this is a film about hippie culture versus political establishment. I didn't feel that was established. I mean, that's what it is about, but it wasn't done in a corralling way where I cared and I was like, all right, yeah, let's give what for. I found the court scenes very pedestrian. And I felt that, you know, at the 1 hour point, I found so much of it so repetitious. I found that we were going through, and it was the same thing happening again. And if I saw Frank Langella smacking his gavel down on the thing and shouting, stop, and you're going to be, you know, you're in contempt of court. And I know that that was what happened, and I'm sure it was what happened, but I felt like it needed some kind of, it needed something in it that was a bit more real. I mean, for saying it was about a real event, it didn't feel at all real. And that was my problem.
But maybe just because it's so, it was so bad. It was such a ridiculous thing. Yeah. I mean, the judge was mad. I mean,
yeah, I'm sure. And by about an hour and 20 minutes in, I thought to myself, okay, well, what he's going for is he's trying to show how inherently ludicrous this was by just presenting how this was. And I thought, well, if it was this ludicrous, this is pretty ludicrous. But it kind of reminded me of why satire has a really difficult job in the modern age. You could not make a satire about Trump because Trump himself is self-satirizes. He is so ludicrous that nothing's going to get there. I mean, having said that, Saturday Night Live did a very good job of it with Alec Baldwin and Jim Carrey. But by and large, to watch an entire film, so because we live in times where such lunacy is at work, nothing particularly felt sort of ridiculous in this. Other than, yes, shocking, outrageous that he treated the black guy like that, but not surprising. Not surprising that he was unrepresented. Not surprising that the government was kind of trying to charge these guys and frame them. You know, there were little standout moments for me. I thought Michael Keaton was a standout moment. He always is.
He always is.
He's just like a sizzling, burning, festering pit of stuff.
Wasn't he brilliant?
He's great. I thought he was great.
Why did you not think of this? I'm your star witness. I thought
he was great, and I thought that was rich. I thought Levitt, Gordon was rich. I thought the main seven and Mark Rylance, I found all the stuff of them going back to their house and them all kind of, you know, sort of planning their next assault, and that, like that scene where Mark Rylance was sort of doing the sort of a sort of dummy run of the challenges that were going to come to Eddie Redmayne. Oh, boring. It was boring. It was tedious. It was badly done. I thought all the stuff in the house was badly done. The faux sort of conflict between Sacha Baron Cohen and Eddie Redmayne, couldn't give a fuck about that. It was like, it's Jeremy Corbyn-esque, this. It left me absolutely cold. I thought, you know, and I'm a Sacha Baron Cohen fan. I thought Sacha Baron Cohen was terrible. I thought he was terrible. He didn't have the accent. He wasn't in the part. He was phoning in his performance. I thought it was a really...
I don't think he was phoning in his performance, but I do actually not disagree with...
He was playing a hippie. It's like, if you're given a piece of paper and you're told how to play a hippie, that's how you play a hippie.
When I watched it again the second time, funnily enough, and I adore him like we all do in the family, don't we? But I thought, actually, if I'm going to have to pick a weak point to this film, it's going to be him.
And Jeremy Strong. I thought Jeremy Strong's voice, I thought the pair of them were just like, oh my God, this is such a caricature of hippies.
I didn't really expect anything of Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I'm after. I would have been more surprised if there was something a bit more interesting about these hippies. I'd have rather known something more about them rather than just... Everyone was an archetype. It was like they were trying... I felt like the film's politics was trying to say, don't group these people as archetypal anti-Vietnam people, but at the same time, it indulged in archetyping each of them. And then I sort of ended up thinking, well, I'm dismissing them as hippies now, and they're fucking annoying me. I ended up wanting them all to go down.
Did you?
Yeah, I found it really frustrating film.
I do know what you mean by that.
I found it really frustrating. There was a sort of smugness to them all. It was like, I felt like I was watching Jeremy Corbyn on trial, and I was personally thinking, I want Jeremy Corbyn to go down because he's fucking annoying. The only one I had sympathy for was the black guy, but all the others, I was just
and also
like,
the black guy has that, they have that scene, and Aaron Sorkin is well known for this. The sort of key scene for him is where the black guy comes in and says, you lot are rebelling against your fathers. I'm actually here because we were lynched.
Yeah.
That is a really key...
And that's what I mean. I know that was part of the story, but it felt like such a bigger story. It's like the crime against black people is so much bigger than this nonsense with these Chicago 7. That I felt the political balance was offshot, and I don't know whether that's because of the Black Lives Matter thing that's happened recently.
And also such strong things as Detroit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you thought, what's being happening to this guy is so much more serious and matters so much more than what's happening to these 7 white guys.
Actually, you're turning me around a bit, because I don't disagree with that, except that I kept thinking, well, I'm going to keep the black guy over here to concentrate on these, because I think, yeah, go on. Yeah, because he was kept over there. And
well, it's a very difficult thing, because if that's what happened, he was trying to present a historical situation. Yeah. And I think there was one particular scene with Mark Rylance and the Black Panther guy. It was quite a good scene. I thought it was Mark Rylance's strongest, but he was just reacting. I felt like that was put in there to try and address the imbalance here, because to equate what was happening to Bobby Searle with these other 7 was patently ridiculous. Yeah, no, and was all about white privilege in a sense. And I thought
that's what the scene's there for.
Yeah, but I felt in the end that this film, the fact that this film was made and was an example of white privilege, I was like, another film needed to be made.
Yeah, I'm in a difficult position now, because I don't actually disagree with everything you were saying, while at the same time loving it. Right. I mean, obviously, if you watch it twice...
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm going to be gracious. I mean, you know, when I got to the second half, where it got better for me was when we were leaving, we started to leave the court. Yeah, and when we were in the actual march, and when we were, you know, and there was the violence, and it was intercut with some of the original footage. When I was given some kind of, you know, context and some air to breathe, actually, it kind of got a bit better for me. But by and large, I thought it was very laboured. It felt very dated, and it felt like something by someone from a bygone era.
Blimey. I mean, I hate taking that on the chin because you're talking about me, but because I enjoyed it so much. But I can actually see your point.
Oh, right.
So, in that respect,
well, and I can see why it might resonate for your generation.
Yeah, I mean, on a second viewing, I enjoyed the tit for tat. Yeah. I enjoyed the courtroom far more than you, and I enjoyed the judge. If you don't enjoy Frank Langella doing his stuff, then it's a pointless exercise. I mean, I thought he was hysterical. Yeah, but a funny arse, I thought. And I thought Mark Rylance was really good. I mean, you didn't, I did. I thought, forgetting the wig, which was difficult to forget.
Michael Keaton. They were the little sparks of joy in it. The rest of it was just a bit... Can it be a hagiography when it's about so many people? It just felt like it was so on point. It was just so politically correct, but not in a sort of creative way.
It felt to me like a sort of project that's been on the back burner for years. And then somebody had to do it. Oh, and in fact, I think did I read somewhere there were loads of people lined up to play the different parts.
Spielberg was lined up to direct it.
That's right. That's right. And I did feel on the second viewing, especially, and I hate to say this, that Abby Hoffman was a weak link. I mean, for saying, he was in a way playing the whole Lenny Bruce type of stand-up comic who could say anything and get away with it.
I found those scenes where we cut to him in the comedy club on the stage. I found them cringeworthy.
And that actually should have been with the black. You got the black thing here, which was incredibly important. And he said it literally that black. This was more important than this, but. And the stand-up routine, which
Abby Hoffman
does in the club, should have been a sort of a thing going through the film, taking us from one side to the other.
Well, they kind of did do that.
Yeah, but funny. I mean, you know, Lenny Bruce was hysterical.
He didn't. Sacha Baron Cohen didn't have the acting range for that. He didn't. He was, you know, he looked the part.
Yeah, he did. He sort of had a few baby, you know, what was it?
But he just didn't have the, you know, he's not an actor in that sense of the word.
No, that's actually
and it was a disappointment. He was a disappointment for me. So should we sum it up and score it? I would like to say that one of the most interesting facts that I learned after the event about Abby Hoffman, the character played by Sacha Baron Cohen, he died tragically, didn't he? Suicide.
He did.
But he wrote a book called Steal This.
He was knocked down rather than suicide.
No, I think it's called Steal This. But they, as you rightly say, they couldn't work out how many it sold, whether it was a success, because he'd invited everyone to steal it, basically. So I would have liked that kind of detail more about these characters, that they all felt like caricatures, they all felt like cartoons. Even though it was presenting a historical situation, I thought the Bobby Seale part of the story was really troubled. It's like you either do this story, but you have to really put some much more sort of weight and emphasis on his story because it's so awful. It kind of heightened, it just highlighted for me, Bobby Seale's fate highlighted for me how fucking self-indulgent these 7 anti-Vietnam people were. So that really frustrated me. I thought the direction was leaden, pedestrian, predictable. It was too long. I didn't think the script was particularly sizzly or clever or witty or just clever. It just felt very repetitive. I thought all the performances were impersonations, and with the exception of Michael Keaton and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I thought those were the only 2 that gave me, you know, I felt I was really getting their character, and they were interestingly the most buttoned up of the lot. So I was really disappointed. It got vaguely more interesting when I was given some some historical context. It just was labouring a point. I just think it was labouring a point, and it was going on and on and on. And it was like being at a dinner party with someone who's got a really interesting take on something. I was just bored. So I'm going to give this 35 out of 100.
Whoa. Well, having taken some of your points and actually not disagreeing with some of that, I think, if you don't like courtroom dramas, it hinges on the courtroom drama. But the whole point of Aaron Sorkin's writing, and clearly it didn't work for you, is the pitter-patter, it's the rhythmic writing. It's sort of like he had his own style of repetition, which didn't work because it annoyed you, but it's not supposed to annoy you. It's supposed to be, so the judge keeps saying the same thing. It actually resided in the Mark Rylance character, which I thought he played brilliantly because he's a brilliant actor. So that I
love Mark Rylance.
Yeah, but the actual sort of pitter-patter of what they were saying and him coming back and whatever, and the Gordon-Levitt in the thing, and then the stupid judge, I thought worked brilliantly. Right. I would actually have done with more of the courtroom scene. I like a courtroom drama, but I like the way he writes. So in that respect, we were at total odds. But in many other respects, I do think that the characters were weird. I thought, you know, at the beginning I thought this is a mistake, Eddie Redmayne. Eddie Redmayne wasn't bad, actually, as it turned out.
No, he was all right.
But yes, the Abby Hoffman was bad. And
Jeremy Strong was weak. I thought
he was. That didn't bother me so much.
He just kept talking with a kind of, you know, stone kind of voice. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah. I mean, it did work more for me because it was stuff that I'd heard, it was stuff that I knew, it was stuff that I'd paid attention to. The Black Lives Matter thing didn't resonate. Actually, it's interesting because it shows you how a review like this can change one's mind. It didn't resonate so much for me. I mean, it's hugely important, and I love all the films about it and all the, you know, all the stuff about it. But in a way, I suppose I felt, well, we're doing all of that in other films. This is a film about
but this. It was so, you made the point very powerfully earlier. It was so staggeringly dramatic what happened when he was brought into the courtroom.
Oh, yeah.
That it kind of makes everything else shrink into insignificance.
Yeah, it does. But I do think that's what he does. He sort of pitter-patters on with giving everything probably an equal thing. The fact that a man could be brought into court bound and gagged, effectively.
Yeah, it's very dramatic.
You know, it is. But I do take some of Mark's points. I thought the writing was good and he didn't. I thought the direction, I don't know so much about direction, but some of the acting was very up and down.
You're big on rhythm. What did you think of its rhythm?
I like the rhythm, but he's like, there are some writers, Damon Runyon's one who wrote Guys and Dolls, they have their own almost verb. And I think Sorkinism is one. They have their own rhythm of writing and you either like it or you don't. I like it. And I take your point that it seems slightly old-fashioned because he hasn't done another film since that one, Molly's Game. He did the same thing in Molly's Game and you'd probably have hated that. It's that pitter-patter.
It just feels very dated.
Yeah, well, it probably is, but it works for me somehow. But I have taken some of your points, so I'm going to bring my score down. I would have given it a higher score than this if we hadn't had this talk. I would give it 65.
Oh, I thought you were going to go 75. Okay, 65.
I would have definitely gone higher if we hadn't had...
And for me, right down to the very fading final fade to black shot of Frank Langella banging his fucking hammer.
That was weak.
You've made your point. I mean, I thought there's no way he can keep... And I even felt for Frank Langella. Frank Langella, you could hear in his voice going, do you really need me to say it this often?
Yeah.
Order,
I don't
order.
disagree with
it's
that.
just like, oh, God.
I thought he's ended his film and he's tired and he doesn't want to actually make another...
No.
Okay.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.